Hello, Packer fans. It is the day before game day, Packers versus Broncos, December 13th, 2025. And this is your pre-game show for Packers versus Broncos. I like to wait until we get elevation updates on Saturday before I do my pre-game report. And it was a good thing we waited because we got some significant news that I have to include in our pre-game discussion. So, this is the news we received today from the Packers. The Green Bay Packers have elevated Pierre Strong Jr. from the practice squad to the active roster. General Manager Brian Gutekunst announced the transaction on Saturday. In addition, Emmanuel Wilson illness has been added to the injury report and is questionable for tomorrow's contest against the Broncos. The Broncos promoted In addition to that, the Broncos promoted inside linebacker Jordan Turner from the practice squad to the active roster. Denver elevated wide receiver Michael Bandy and quarterback Sam Ilgmer from the practice squad for Sunday's game against the Packers. The Broncos also re-signed former Packer Mercedes Lewis to the practice squad after he was waived on Thursday. So my thoughts on this news, okay? First of all, let's talk about the betting line, because the betting line kind of takes the pulse of the general public as a whole for who they think is going to win the game, okay? Before we got this information, the Packers were favored by 2.5 points. And now the Packers are favored by 1.5 points. It wouldn't surprise me if that line slid down to -1 before the start of the game. There's definitely a trend of some money coming into the Broncos, which tells you that people are a little concerned about this information, and they're hedging their bets on this game. My guess is if Josh Jacobs is active, which we'll find out 2.5 hours before the game, we'll probably see the line go to -2 for the Packers, and it would probably get to maybe -3 if Jacobs is out of the game. So my thoughts on this: I think Josh Jacobs is going to play in this game. Josh Jacobs has historically had great success against the Broncos. He definitely has a strong rivalry against the Broncos for all of his years as a Raider, and he actually was very effective against the Broncos historically. Now, that's not the same defense that they have now, but there's a lot of things that would motivate Josh Jacobs to play. He's very much aware that this is very critical for playoff seeding. He's a competitor. He doesn't want to let his teammates down. I would argue the fact that Wilson is sick only increases the chances that Josh Jacobs will actually play in this game, because Josh Jacobs is going to feel like he's got to be there for the rest of the team. So my gut feeling is this is much to do about nothing. Josh Jacobs will play in this game. He will start. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wilson found a way to be available as well. Now, this is an illness, so he's got 24 hours to rest, recover, get some treatment from the medical staff, everything possible to get him into the game. You should remember that Wilson was very briefly a member of the Broncos, and they cut him. And he talked about earlier this week that if he had an opportunity to make some plays against the Broncos, he would absolutely love it. So my instinct says Josh Jacobs is going to play in this game. I would say Wilson is about 50-50. It really has to do about whether he can get enough hydration and enough energy back into his system to be effective in the game. They might limit him even if he is active for the game. So we're going to have to watch that very closely. But I do think Josh Jacobs will be available. I will be shocked if an hour and a half before the game they deactivate Josh Jacobs. That would really surprise me. All indications are that he will be in the lineup for Sunday. So if you're betting on the Packers, I know this is a football show, but let's talk about the sporting line right now. As I said, I think it's going to trend right now. It's Packers -1.5. I think it might get down to -1 right before the announcement of these players. And then it'll pop back up probably to -2 or -2.5 if Josh Jacobs is active in this game. So if you believe the Packers are going to win this game, you might want to wait until before they announce deactivations to see if you can get the line down to -1. If you're really dubious about the Packers in this game, then you might actually want to take the chance and see if Josh Jacobs is out for this game, because then I think the line might switch to the Broncos -3. So there's a lot at stake here, but I'm 80 to 85% sure that Josh Jacobs will play in this game. If there's always the chance he could be knocked out due to injury. He has a recurring knee injury, but I believe Josh Jacobs will make a go of it in this game. And I think it's actually probably 50-50 that Wilson will be available in this game, because Wilson not only is dealing with an illness, and he could wake up tomorrow and be fine, or he might wake up tomorrow and be worse. But also Wilson has a little bit of motivation as a former Bronco to be in this game. So we know that is a motivating factor for players. With that said, let's now take a look at the matchup for this game. This is a pre-game show after all, so let's take a look at our matchups. I'm going to share my screen here. Brought to you by PFF. All right, so one of the things I've done over the last couple days, before we start talking about matchups, I went back and I watched the last 5 Broncos games over the last couple days. What did I see? I saw an inconsistent offense that left a lot of field goals on the scoreboard instead of touchdowns. There were many situations where the Broncos are at the red zone or close to the red zone, and they consistently found ways to put up 3 points instead of 7. In addition, over the last probably 5 or 6 games, they've very rarely scored more than 17 points. They did have the overtime game against Washington, but number one, that was Washington's defense. And number two, they had a whole extra quarter of overtime, and they got to 27 points. So I think this is going to be a low-scoring game for the Broncos for sure. If you're going to look at the over right now, which is 42.5, I would tend to go the under in this game. So one of the picks that I would do if I was going for the Packers, I would probably take the Packers to win, not give up the points, and then take the under in this game. Because the Broncos generally are not scoring enough points for this to get over 42.5. So the only way that happens is if the Packers put on a bunch of points, and then I'd be so happy that I probably wouldn't care that my bet didn't come to fruition. So that's my take on that. So let's look at the team metrics here. We look at overall, the Packers are currently second per PFF. The Broncos are a respectable 8th. On defense, the Packers are 12th, and the Broncos are 4th. I would argue that the Packers are playing a lot better than 12th lately. And I think the Broncos struggle enough on offense that I think that's going to maybe make this more of a neutral rating on defense. I think both defenses are going to have a lot to prove, and they're going to come out and play very hard. On offense, the Packers are 3rd, and the Broncos are 10th. And that's one of the things that really came up again when I looked at the tape for the Broncos wins. There's a lot of points left on the field. A lot of opportunities where they would drive the length of the field and then put up a field goal. Again and again and again. Lots of field goals. That might be Sean Payton being conservative. That might be this offense being limited. I also saw Bo Nix has a tendency to sail passes over his receivers. I've seen that multiple times in the games that I've watched for the Broncos. Since I'm local to Denver, I've been to quite a few Broncos games the last 2 years. And he does have a tendency when he's rushed to overthrow his running back, his receivers. And that really gives the secondary an opportunity to get the opponent back into the game. I saw that multiple times in recent games, including against Washington. That game never should have gone to overtime, but Bo Nix threw a costly interception that got Washington back into the game. So I think if the Packers minimize the run and force Bo Nix to be the hero, I think Bo Nix is going to give us a couple turnovers that are going to make the difference in this game. Now, if we look at offensive snaps, the Broncos get about 4 more snaps per game. Not significant difference. And running the ball. The Packers run the ball 43.5. The Broncos only 37.3. And I think that's a mistake. They did better last week against the Raiders, but the couple weeks before that, they really struggled to get a lot of rushing yardage as a team. They had a couple big plays here and there. Harvey's really good around the goal line, not taking that away from him, but churning out the yards has been a real struggle for the Broncos, and you can see that why they're only running the ball 37.3%. So I think that actually plays into the hands of the Packers tomorrow, because the Packers would love to let Bo Nix try to win the game versus running the ball, which is one of the biggest weaknesses, I would argue, for the Packers right now as they try to reestablish their defensive line. Is there was some weakness that we saw against the Lions. There was some weakness that we saw against the Bears. Now, to be clear, I think they did a great job of limiting big plays in the running game, but there were yards to be had if you were patient. The Bears showed that in the second half last week. The Broncos don't show a lot of patience with their running game. So I think if the Packers can limit their success early in the game, that Peyton and Bo Nix might say, hey, it's time to air the ball out. And I think that's really a big mistake for the Broncos against this great Packers secondary. So we're going to watch that very closely. All right, EPA per run. The Broncos actually have a better EPA per run than the Packers, but they get away from running the ball, and that's a mistake. Now, EPA per pass. Now, this is really telling. So, EPA per pass play, the Packers are 0.23 and the Broncos are 0.05. We're throwing the ball. It does not give them as much benefit as you would expect to see with a team with their record. That tells me, again, we want to get Bo Nix throwing the ball. We want to have good coverage, and we want to make plays on the ball when it's in the air, and I think that could be a big difference in this game. Let's take a look at the quarterback matchup here. Jordan Love versus Bo Nix. I don't think that's even close. Basically, PFF thinks Jordan Love is the 9th best based on power rankings, but that's weighted. If you look at the last couple weeks, Jordan Love has been on fire, and this matchup is not even close. PFF gave Jordan Love several marks around 90, which is very hard to do in a single game. And at 89.9, Jordan Love is performing at the highest level of his career. He is commanding the offense. He is the difference maker in this game, in my opinion. And that's why I feel that the Packers have an excellent chance of winning this game, because Jordan Love is a proven playmaker, and he's had great success at throwing the ball down and making explosive plays. Denver Broncos really struggle on explosive plays, and that could come back to haunt them right here. So let's look at passer rating clean, 131.7 for Jordan Love. Bo Nix, 98.8. Now, under pressure, which is probably going to be a big part of this game, they're about neutral here. Jordan Love has done great under pressure the last couple weeks, so I wouldn't look at this number as a negative. I think he's played much better the last 3 or 4 weeks under pressure than he did in the middle of the season. Big time throw percentage. Jordan Love is at 5.48%, which is a huge clip for big time throws, big explosive plays. Bo Nix is only at 3.68%. So again, it might be Sean Payton being conservative with the offense. It might be Bo Nix just not making the plays that are in front of him. But the passing game is really a negative for the Broncos in this matchup. So let's talk really briefly about the wins for these teams, because I think it does matter here. Okay, so let's look at week 11 through week 14 here. Okay, so Packers scored 27. It was 23-6 against the Vikings. I would argue they could have scored more points there, but they took the air out of the ball at the end of the game. Against the Lions, we've got 31-24, and I think the Lions are a pretty comparable team for the Broncos, really. I think the Broncos, and it's important to note, the Broncos have had the 31st easiest schedule for the league so far this season. The Broncos have feasted on a lot of bad teams, whereas the NFC North, we've been facing quality opponents all season long, and I really think that's going to be a difference in this game. I think the strength of schedule really favors the Packers in this game. Here it is right here. I should have pointed it out earlier. Strength of schedule for the Packers, 15th. Broncos is 28th. By some metrics, it's as high as 31. So the Broncos really haven't faced the same opponents, okay? So let's go back here. So we beat up on the Vikings. We had a great quality win against the Lions. We had a quality win against the Bears. And then we have the Broncos coming up. So let's take a look at the Broncos games now, all right? There are some struggles here, okay? So they won by 3 against the Texans. They won by 3 against the Raiders in Week 10. I actually was at that game, the Broncos-Raiders game, and that was a horrible game for both offenses. And it was really amazing that the Broncos ended up getting a win in that game. Against Kansas City, 22-19. Not a great opponent right now. Washington Commanders, 27-26. They almost lost the game to the Commanders, who had a 3-8 record at the time. Not a good showing for the Broncos there. You could say it was on the road, but still, this was a bad Commanders team, and they barely won thanks to Benito making a great play. Great play for Benito. I'm not taking that away from him, but that Broncos team was close to losing that game against a very inferior opponent. Let's take a look at the game against the Raiders. We've got 24-17. That was a win by 7. They got 7 points from a punt return. Now, Special teams is obviously a part of the game, but if they hadn't got that punt return, they could have lost to the Raiders. So it's really not looking too good as far as the quality wins for the Broncos here. So I really think that's going to be a factor when we look at the results of the game on Sunday. Let's take a look at our lineups now. We'll start out with the Broncos on offense. We'll start out with 2 tight end and the Packers base defense, okay? Let's look at the Packers defense first. McKinney, Williams, Valentine, and Nixon are arguably, I think, one of the better corner defensive back rooms in the NFL right now. Valentine is a quality starter. Nixon is a quality starter. And both of our safeties are in the top half of the league as far as production. Then we look at our linebackers. McDuffie, Cooper, and Walker are all playing very well. They tend to downgrade Walker in a couple areas, but I still think Walker, when he's healthy, is playing very well for the Packers. Of course, we have Micah Parsons. We've got Brooks and Wooden in the middle, and Rashawn Gary. We also have Enigbare, who's been coming in and splitting snaps with Rashawn Gary and making some really good plays, both against the running back and against the quarterback. So I think that depth is really showing through with the defensive line for the Packers. Now let's take a look at the Broncos on offense, okay? Sutton is a great player. Not going to take anything away from him. He's going to be matched up against Corey Valentine. I think Corey Valentine can do enough to limit Sutton's success. Because then you look at the other side of the ball, Franklin is a below average wide receiver on the other side of the ball. We've got 2 tight ends that are below average for the NFL. The offensive line is playing great, but we got to watch McGlinchey. If he might be deactivated for this game. He had an injury on Friday. I believe it was in practice because he practiced Wednesday, he practiced Thursday, then he didn't practice on Friday. So maybe he got injured on Thursday's practice and he's now questionable for the game. That is huge for the Broncos if they have to bring in a right tackle off the bench to replace McGlinchey. So we're going to have to watch that very closely. Left guard is not playing very well, so that's an opportunity for the Packers right there. But if McGlinchey is out, then you can move Micah Parsons over to that side, or you can let Micah Parsons go against the best tackle for the Broncos, and then let the other defensive ends for the Packers really feast on the replacement for McGlinchey. So it's going to be a big thing to hear about an hour and a half before the game if McGlinchey is playing or not. And that also might move the point spread if he's deactivated. So it's going to be very interesting to see where the final point spread is for this game. Bo Nix, 16th out of 40 ranked quarterbacks, and Harvey is 23 out of 63 ranked halfbacks. So Harvey is really good. He's a smaller back. He's only 205 pounds. He's really good around the goal line in the red zone. He's really good as a receiver. But between the tackles, he is not a big threat in the running game unless he pops in between with a block. So Harvey, if we limit Harvey early and the Broncos are forced to throw the ball a lot, that's good news for the Packers. All right, so let's take a look at the 3 wide receivers for the Broncos, and we'll go to nickel for the Packers. All right, the big change here is they bring in Mims Jr. I really like Mims Jr. As a special teams player, and as a slot player, he's great. Is he as good as what the Packers have? No, but he is definitely a player that the Packers are going to have to watch very closely. If they limit Sutton's ability and Franklin isn't that big of a threat on the other side, Mims might be the guy that they go to for plays on third down. And that's why Bullard, who's actually playing really well right now, is going to be a big factor in this game. If we can limit those third down conversions for the Broncos, that's going to bode very well for the Packers. So let's now switch this over to base defense. And we'll put the Packers in 2 tight end. All right, let's take a look at what we've got here, okay? They've got great play out of Tufanga, who came over from the 49ers last year. He's 13th. But Jones, the strong safety, is not playing that great. He's 56 out of 95 safeties. So there's an opportunity here. If you can get some plays against Jones deep, that will be a big advantage. Greenlaw and Singleton are very solid linebackers, and they've been playing very well for the Broncos. It's going to be tough sledding running the ball or throwing in the middle of the field with these 2 linebackers. So we're going to have to watch that very carefully. We know Patrick Surtain is a great shutdown corner. He's probably going to be traveling with Watson, would be my guess. Or they'll just have them on each side, and we'll see if Watson can get some matchups here against Moss, for example. But if Patrick Surtain is focused on stopping Watson, then that gives you opportunities to get the ball to Dobbs and Musgrave and Fitzpatrick, as well as Jacobs out of the backfield in 2 tight end sets. Now let's take a look at nickel for the Packers. 3 wide receiver for the Packers, nickel for the Broncos. And this is where I think things get very interesting here. Now, they do have McMillan. McMillan has really made his hay as a rusher of the quarterback and not as much against the cornerback. A lot of his rating is because he has a lot of sacks. He has 4 sacks, which is pretty impressive for a cornerback this time of the season. But as far as coverage, I think Jaden Reed can consistently get open on third down and convert third downs. Now, we know the pass rush is going to come from Cooper and Benito and Allen and Franklin Myers. No question about it. But I think the Packers are going to hold up sufficiently with their offensive line to get quick plays out against the pass rush. And if you could do that as well as running the ball, it will slow down that pass rush and force the Broncos to play more of a straight up defense or blitz trying to get pressure. Either way, I think Jordan Love has the advantage in that situation as long as the offensive line does their part to protect him. If Jordan Love gets 1.5 to 2 seconds, he should be able to find an open man against a strong blitz from the Broncos, and they should be able to make explosives down the field. So there are your matchups there. And let's go to our predictions for the game. Now, prediction for this game is tricky because we do have a lot of unknowns here. We have McClinchy, who might not play. We have Josh Jacobs, who might not play. We have Wilson, who might not play. So I'm going to caveat this, okay? My prediction for the game, and I've said before, I think Josh Jacobs will play. Assuming Josh Jacobs will play, I think we will see the Packers victory with a score of 21-17. So I would take the under. I would take the Packers and the under in this game. The Broncos have really struggled to score more than 17 points consistently. So if the Packers can get to 21, 24 points, which they can certainly do, then I think the Packers are going to come back with a victory from Denver. So very excited to watch this game. I'll be there in person in the stands. Very excited about watching this with several good friends that are Broncos fans. I live in Denver, so I do root for this team when they're not playing for the Packers. But I do think the Packers really have a significant advantage as long as Jacobs plays in the passing game and in the running game that will slow down that pass rush. I also feel that the Broncos, due to their strength of schedule, have not faced an opponent like the Packers. I think the Packers are the best team that the Broncos have played yet this season, with the possible exception of the Eagles early on in the season. So I do believe this is going to be a strong test for the Broncos, and I think the Packers, if they do what they have done over the last couple weeks on offense, and they're solid on defense, I think the Packers can come away with a 4-point victory. And we'll see if I'm right, and hopefully we'll have a victory Monday on Monday. I'll talk to you then. Enjoy the game. Again, I won't be doing another update because I will be actually going to the stadium for this game. But again, watch those activations and deactivations an hour and a half before the game. If Josh Jacobs is out and Wilson is out, then I think it leans towards being a Broncos victory by 3. So it all comes down to who is going to play and not going to play, and we won't find out till an hour and a half before the game. But I like the Packers' chances of continuing their success on the road. And as always, go Pack Go. We'll talk to you after the game on Monday.